Hi, I'm Matthew Schwartz with Information Security Media Group, and it's my pleasure to welcome to the ISMG studio at RSA, Jessica Hetrick. Jessica, you're Senior Manager for Cyber Strategy at Optiv.
Yes, sir.
And my first question for you, because I love cybercrime, threats, I know it's horrible, but it's a fact of life, it's a reality that organizations are getting hit. And so what are some of the risks, threats, and impacts that you're seeing your customers face today?
Yeah, great question. So first off, as the Cyber Advisory Solutions leader, Optiv sees a lot. We are a major cyber partner for organizations in terms of how to better secure them. And I will say that overall, the biggest threat right now that we're seeing, and I think this trend will continue, especially with COVID now in semi-rear sight, we're seeing a lot of ransomware still. We're seeing organizations get hit, both small and large, by financially motivated crimes. And so as that trend continues, we also see a big risk to overall the organization and their ability to trust their technology that's in place. And so organizations that are impacted from a ransomware perspective or a general cyber threat perspective need to be not only thinking proactively, but understanding what preparedness means for both driving down the risk of if something occurs, but also when something occurs, and knowing that when is inevitable. If the adversary wants to get in, they will. And so a lot of organizations right now are looking at taking a proactive step on the recovery space, and that's where really today's topic comes into play.
Okay, yes, cyber recovery solution. I know we're going to be talking about that.
Yep.
And talk me through that a little bit. Why do organizations need a cyber recovery solution?
Yeah, great question. So that proactive thinking needs to spread throughout the organization, right? Technology does not just impact the security space anymore, right? If technology is impacted, if your organization is if you have ransomware in your organization, not just one part of the business goes down. That's not just a cybersecurity problem. That becomes a business problem. And so the cyber recovery solution is meant to help organizations think holistically about what recovery means. And so we proactively help organizations understand the criticality of assets within the environment, and from the systems, the data, and the applications, all of the interdependencies across the business. So we're partnering with organizations to not just understand what those interdependencies are, but subsequently how they can better protect them. And so we actually think proactively about recovery, which supports actually the identification, prioritization across the environment of critical components.
I love the emphasis you're placing on being proactive, because whenever we hear about ransomware incidents and attempting to recover, the more work organizations have done in advance, generally the better the outcome.
Yes.
I suspect that you're seeing that as well. And I want to ask, because you have this approach, what are some of the components of the cyber recovery solution?
Yeah, so there's a lot. In traditional BCDR sense, organizations are categorizing what's most critical within the environment. However, those programs don't tend to take the technology recovery piece into account because of natural disasters coming as the priority in past time. So what the cyber recovery solution does is we actually partner with these BCDR programs. We partner with the security programs, and we partner across the business to understand the criticality first. So we look at the identification and prioritization of not only critical assets, but general processes. So we look holistically at where the prioritization is in those processes. And then secondarily, we're helping map out all of those critical dependencies that I talked about before, where we're seeing, systems need to be recovered first before applications are brought online. BCDR programs might look at applications and tier those out, but then they're not looking at the whole holistic business picture. And so we work not only across the business from the technology perspective, but then we map everything out. That's really kind of the big chunk phase where we're working a lot with the different system owners, the data owners, the application owners, and then as a follow-on to that, we're helping support the implementation of an air-gapped immutable vaulted technology, right? The kind of cutting-edge components out there from a technology perspective that interweave with the people and the processes. And I know that theme is pretty consistent across cybersecurity as people, process, and technology. But we take all of that then, and as kind of that, I would say, final major component of CRS is we're helping organizations test those different components that we put into play. Understanding how people respond to different things, what recovery actually looks like, how your systems and your data and your applications all interact to holistically recover to a secure state.
So the goal it sounds like, to not stress test. I don't want to say that about people, but definitely the technology, the processes. But that would be one of the major goals then, is to have some assurance that things are going to behave the way that you hope they will, and have planned that they will behave.
And account for the adjustments in the environment, right? And sometimes things might change. Every complex system out there changes on a daily, if not hourly basis. And so taking into account those adjustments is a necessary piece to understand at the granular level how things interact, including the people with them. And so our process allows for all of those different components to come together so organizations can, again, recover holistically.
To what degree is customization required, and how do you help organizations deal with that, achieve that, excel at that, however you want to put it?
Great question. It's imperative. And so every single aspect of the cyber recovery solution is customized to the environment. There's generally, from a prioritization perspective, kind of that front-end process. That might be a little bit more of that kind of business categorization perspective. I mean, when you think about different industries, you can probably guess at least what would be most important to them. Finances tend to be up there for organizations, their ability to pay people or their ability to do transactional business. And so when you look at the different industries, there might be some general components to it, but then everything after that comes into the customization perspective. From obviously naming those individual systems at a granular level to identifying the interdependencies, that's going to be unique to every single organization. And so customization is a big part of it, and we approach that in a very systematic with a very systematic methodology, allowing us to help organizations in that customized way.
You talked about naming systems. That might be the first time organizations have actually done some of these things.
It's true.
Which obviously is a best practice to have done that. So prompting
Absolutely.
them a bit as they deal with those things. How is this being communicated by security teams to business leadership in terms of what this is doing, how it's doing it? The language there is often much more about risk reduction.
Correct.
Or about improving, used to be cyber resiliency, increasingly we hear it as business resiliency.
Yes, absolutely.
So what kinds of discussions are they having? What are some tactics that you recommend that they use when they're attempting to communicate how this addresses risk, for example, or how this addresses resiliency?
Yeah, the value of it. And I think the big thing for organizations is that they understand what their business is doing, right? Having security professionals partner with the business is becoming an increasing need. And I would say overall, risk reduction is I would say the most understood form of that communication. And so I would say general best practice is to understand how it quantifies in the environment, where this would take priority. Organizations that are more immature might see BCDR as the central component, but then they don't take into account the fact that ransomware might hit an environment and then subsequently how they recover from that. And one of the best recommendations that I can give to organizations is to understand what the threat landscape looks like in terms of not only their industry, but their specific organization, and then understand ultimately where the cyber recovery solution fits into that, and from a technology perspective, how much they rely on technology to do their business or to enable their business. And so organizations, we see the greatest success for organizations in that communication when they're taking not only the technology components coupled with the threat landscape to communicate the risk overall, and then what the cyber recovery solution subsequently does to reduce that. And so all of those pieces together, would come out as a general standard risk practice, but in terms of that communication, we see organizations needing to quantify that a little bit more and drill into the specifics about what they do and don't have.
Okay. Quantification, understanding the dark arts, that is the risk discussion. I mean, dark arts for tech folks sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So you were talking before about disaster recovery and business continuity, and how so often maybe organizations are assuming that there's going to be some components and that they're not actually there. They get hit by ransomware and they discover, whoops, we haven't planned for that. I think that's probably one of the big questions that security leaders should be asking their own organizations when they look at their enterprise's ability to recover and be resilient.
Absolutely.
But so, verify that for me, if you will. And what other questions, when you work with organizations, what other questions do you tell security leaders they should be asking about this?
Yeah, and the one thing that I want to make sure to emphasize is that the cyber recovery solution, while focused in that recovery space, actually supports a much broader business objective, which is risk reduction as a whole. When you look at cyber recovery and what that capability actually is from Optiv, we not only are taking into account the different systems and data and applications and how they all are interdependent, but a lot of time we're identifying systems that organizations didn't even account for before. And so from an identification and prioritization perspective, they're actually able to then spearhead the preparedness in those spaces as well, which then subsequently gives them the ability to respond more rapidly, maybe even just identify and mitigate risks on the front end, right? If they have systems that are a part of the organization, a part of a different process that they might have not previously accounted for, they're suddenly able to now not only account for that, but potentially also flag intellectual property areas or any type of PII, personally identifiable information that might be in the environment that they didn't necessarily see before. And so I would implore organizations to look that granular, to not only map out from a network architecture perspective the environments, but subsequently understand what that recovery systematic process is. And that step-by-step build allows organizations to see what needs to happen first, second, and third in their environment in order to securely recover.
So prepare, and if you don't know that you're running something or own something or have something, you're probably not managing it correctly, and you certainly probably won't be able to recover easily if it gets hit.
Absolutely, especially if it's a system that you heavily depend on that you weren't aware before.
You sound like you speak from experience.
Well, I wouldn't say I speak from experience, but I would say I've helped organizations significantly in that space. In a past life, I've seen what ransomware can do, especially if you don't have secure backups, especially if you don't understand that legacy, the legacy replication and redundancy, process that existed within environments is actually what adversaries are targeting first. In those ransomware cases where adversaries are able to almost, I would say, guarantee that they can make money, they're targeting those replicated and redundant backups first and then working their way out of the environment as they go. And when they do that, they're subsequently able to ensure that they get paid because organizations can't securely recover. And so not only having an air-gapped immutable vaulted technology in place, but understanding the recovery to the process to recovery from that is going to be imperative for organizations in order to understand secure state and what that looks like and ultimately reduce risk of downtime.
So lots of threats out there, a clear imperative for businesses to get better at doing something about it. Thank you very much, Jessica, for giving us some insights into what they should be doing.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm Matthew Schwartz with Information Security Media Group. Thanks for joining us.